They won't tell you this in your regular doctor's visit, but let's be honest. If you've stopped masturbating in old age, it's possible your body is already deteriorating, and you probably don't even know it. No, this isn't a taboo subject or locker room nonsense. It's a real clinical and physiological truth. Right? And the consequences of ignoring this truth can be devastating. Not just for your sexual health, but also for your brain, your heart, your sleep, your immune system, and even your self-esteem. My name is Dr. Lauren Hart. I'm a urologist and a specialist in men's health, with over 30 years of experience working with elderly patients across the country. I've dedicated my career to studying the changes in the body as we age, especially concerning intimacy, hormones, and long-term vitality. And one of the biggest silent threats I've ever seen is this: older adults abandoning their sexual health, and with it, a key aspect of their overall well-being. This is what might surprise you. Masturbation isn't just a leftover impulse from your youth. In fact, it's one of the most powerful tools your body still has to regulate your hormones, strengthen your brain, protect your prostate, and even fight depression. And if you've stopped masturbating or never started, the price you're paying could be much greater than you imagine. In the next few minutes, I'm going to explain exactly what happens in your body when you stop masturbating in old age. And what I'm about to share could completely change your perspective on your health and on yourself from this moment forward. Before we begin, if you care about staying sharp, healthy, and independent as you age, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss important tips made especially for you. If this message resonates with you, type 1 in the comments section. If not, type 0. Your comments help me create content that truly supports your health and well-being. Now, let's start with the first and perhaps most overlooked consequence of not masturbating in old age: the silent effect it has on prostate and urinary tract health. 1. Decreased prostate health and urinary function. When I started practicing urology over 3 decades ago, I didn't expect so many patients to open up about something so private, yet so crucial to their health: the silent disappearance of sexual habits in old age. I remember a man sitting in front of me who said, "Doctor, I thought I didn't need that part of my life anymore." He was a little over 70, in shape and alert, but he would wake up 4 or 5 times a night just to go to the bathroom and didn't understand why. What he didn't know, and what most men are unaware of, is that regular ejaculation, even through masturbation, plays a crucial role in the proper functioning of the prostate. The prostate is not a simple, passive gland in the body. It's a living, dynamic organ. It produces fluid, expands, and contracts. And like any system, it suffers if it's neglected. Without regular stimulation and release, prostatic fluid can stagnate. This stagnation creates the perfect environment for inflammation, swelling, and over time, pressure that affects everything from urination to sexual performance. You might feel this as a heavier bladder, a weaker urinary stream, or an uncomfortable sensation of fullness that doesn't go away. These aren't just annoyances, they are early warning signs. And here's the danger. Chronic prostate congestion can silently worsen and turn into more serious conditions, such as benign prostatic hyperplasia, BPH, which affects almost 50% of men over 60. If left unchecked, it can cause urinary retention, bladder infections, and even the need for catheterization. That same man I mentioned ended up needing surgery to relieve the pressure, something that, if addressed earlier with simple, consistent habits, could have been avoided. Regular ejaculation helps clean out the prostate, eliminate fluid, and reduce the risk of buildup. Studies show that men who ejaculate 21 or more times per month have a significantly lower probability of developing prostate cancer than those who don't. And let me be very clear, we are not talking about returning to youth or obsessive behavior. This is not fantasy, it is function, using your biology to protect your body in the simplest, most natural way possible. By stopping masturbation in old age, you are not just ignoring pleasure. You are risking pain, inflammation, and the gradual loss of control over one of the most basic human functions, urination. I've had patients who were afraid to leave home because they couldn't trust their bladder. I've seen strong, proud men reduced to sleepless nights and nocturnal anxiety over a condition that could have been controlled or prevented with something as simple as regular self-stimulation. And yes, this also comes at a mental cost. Losing control of your body like this, having to plan bathroom stops, fearing long car trips, waking up every 2 hours at night. All of this erodes your sense of independence. It's not just about your prostate. It's about your freedom. But here is where it gets even more surprising, because what starts in the prostate doesn't stay there. The next consequence affects not only the body but also the brain. And once it begins, it can alter how you think, feel, and remember, sometimes in ways that are difficult to reverse. Let's talk about what happens to your mental clarity and cognition when self-stimulation disappears from your routine. If you're still here and these thoughts make sense, type 1 in the comments section to let me know you're with me, committed, and valuing this message. Now, let's continue with point 2. 2. Cognitive fog and decreased mental clarity. Recently, a patient in his 60s came to see me. He wasn't complaining about his prostate or his energy. He just said something that hit me. "Doctor, I don't feel like myself. I walk into a room and forget why I'm there. I lose my train of thought mid-sentence. I used to be so sharp. Is it just my age?" That's a question I hear more than you can imagine. And yes, aging brings natural cognitive changes. But what most people, even highly educated adults concerned with their health, don't know is that sexual activity, including masturbation, plays a fundamental role in protecting brain function. This is what happens when you indulge in personal pleasure. Your brain releases a cocktail of neurochemicals, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all directly related to memory, concentration, and emotional regulation. These chemicals don't just make you feel good in the moment, they also help build and protect neural connections, stimulate blood flow to the brain, and reduce cortisol, the stress hormone, which in high amounts damages neurons. Now, when you stop masturbating, especially for long periods, these natural chemical releases that protect the brain become less frequent. Over time, this can weaken your mental capacity. You might find it harder to concentrate, process information, or even feel motivated. It doesn't happen overnight. It sets in slowly. First, you forget names, then you forget what day it is, and then you start to completely doubt your mind. And in that doubt, something worse can take root. Fear. I've seen patients spiral into anxiety and depression just because they thought they were losing their sanity, when in reality, their brain lacked stimulation and chemical balance. In men, there is an additional hormonal change. Testosterone, a hormone linked to memory, decision-making, and vitality, can decrease faster when sexual activity drops to almost zero. Testosterone doesn't just affect desire, it affects self-esteem, strength, and clarity. And yes, frequent and healthy ejaculation can help regulate and preserve testosterone levels. As we age, some studies are beginning to link the reduction in sexual activity in older adults to the first signs of cognitive decline, even dementia. I'm not saying that stopping masturbation causes Alzheimer's, but I am saying this. When the brain is deprived of stimulation, emotional release, and hormonal support, it becomes more vulnerable, losing rhythm and resilience. For many people, the fog becomes so dense that it changes how they live, interact, think, and see themselves. One man told me he stopped going to his chess club because he couldn't concentrate on the game. Another retired professor said he felt empty every morning. These weren't memory problems that needed medication, but symptoms of a life disconnected from physical intimacy, even with himself. And here's the tragic part. All of this is preventable. You don't need expensive remedies or therapies. Sometimes it starts by reconnecting with your body, giving it the attention it silently craves, because when you stimulate the body, the brain awakens. But this loss of mental sharpness is only part of the equation. What happens next, when your emotional balance begins to deteriorate and your mood sags without warning, can be even more subtle, more harmful, and much harder to deal with. Let's explore how giving up on intimacy can silently invite depression into your daily life. 3. Heightened depression and emotional numbness. I had a patient in his 70s, a widower, retired and relatively healthy, who came to see me not for a physical illness, but for something he couldn't explain. He looked into my eyes and said, "I don't feel anything anymore. Not sadness, not joy, just emptiness." He paused and added, "Is that normal for someone my age?" That question still echoes in my mind because I hear variations of it all the time. What many people assume is just part of aging, boredom, disconnection, the slow fading of emotions, often has a deeper, more physiological cause that no one likes to talk about: the loss of sexual stimulation, especially self-pleasure. Here's the truth. When you stop connecting with your own body in an intimate and physical way, your emotional landscape begins to change, silently but profoundly. Masturbation is not just a physical act, it is also an emotional release. It's your body's innate system for relieving stress. During climax, the brain releases powerful chemicals like oxytocin and endorphins, natural mood stabilizers that fight anxiety, tension, and dejection. When you eliminate this release from your life, especially at a time when stress, loneliness, or grief are already present, you run the risk of becoming emotionally numb. And this numbness can lead to something more dangerous: depression. I've seen how it develops slowly. Someone stops masturbating after losing a partner or because they think it's no longer appropriate for their age. Weeks turn into months. They become quieter, more withdrawn, lose interest in hobbies and even conversation. They sleep more or less, their appetite changes, and life turns gray. And the cruel irony: most don't see the connection. They blame it on age or think it's their destiny. But in reality, what they lack is the simple yet essential act of connecting with their own body, not just for pleasure, but for emotional survival. Depression in the elderly is often underdiagnosed because it doesn't always manifest as sadness. Sometimes it appears as fatigue, irritability, detachment, or a lack of motivation, an absence of desire. While medication and therapy are important, I can't imagine how many patients I've helped simply by encouraging them to reclaim physical intimacy. One man told me he felt alive again after he started touching himself regularly for the first time in years. He said it not only improved his mood, but it reminded him that he was still a human being, not just a body about to fade away. This small act gave him back a piece of himself that he thought was lost forever. And this is what I want you to understand. Masturbation in old age is not about fantasy, lust, or shame. It's about keeping your emotional system healthy. It's about giving your body a reason to feel, to release, to remember what it means to be present. Because when you lose that connection, you don't just risk sadness, you risk isolation, emotional atrophy, and in some cases, losing the will to live. But the emotional consequences aren't the only ones. As nights grow longer and sleep becomes more erratic, another hidden cost emerges, one that can affect memory, the immune system, and the risk of serious illnesses. Let's talk now about how the lack of sexual pleasure could be stealing the deep, restorative sleep your body desperately needs. If you are still watching and find these ideas relevant, type 1 in the comments section to let me know you're here and following along. Now, let's move on to point 4. 4. Poor sleep quality. I remember a man in his 70s who came to see me after months of poor sleep. He looked exhausted, pale, and frustrated. "Doctor," he said, "I fall asleep, but I wake up at 2 a.m. as if I'd been shot. I just lie there, staring at the ceiling, waiting for dawn." We ran tests. The results were clean. There was no sleep apnea or any major warning signs. But when I gently asked about his intimate life, He looked away and mumbled, "That part of me is gone." But that part of him, which he thought was lost, was possibly the key to what his body craved: a restorative and uninterrupted sleep. Sleep isn't just about closing your eyes and being still. It's a complex hormonal process. And one of the most effective natural triggers for deep sleep is something most people forget about after a certain age: the orgasm. During climax, the body releases oxytocin, prolactin, and endorphins, a perfect chemical combination created by nature for the nervous system to shift from stress to rest. At the same time, cortisol, the hormone responsible for anxiety and wakefulness, drops drastically. Your breathing slows, your heart rate stabilizes, your muscles relax. You enter the ideal state for deep sleep. Now imagine eliminating this process from your life completely, not just for a week, but for months or even years. This is what happens when older adults stop masturbating. The body loses a natural tool it once depended on. And what fills that void? Often, restlessness and frustration, tossing and turning in bed. Some resort to sleeping pills, others simply accept exhaustion as normal. But the consequences of poor sleep go far beyond simple tiredness. Chronic sleep deprivation weakens the immune system, accelerates cognitive decline, increases the risk of heart disease, and heightens vulnerability to anxiety and depression in the elderly. It also contributes to falls, memory problems, and loss of independence. I've seen patients who once led active and engaged lives slowly withdraw, not because of a serious illness, but simply because they were too exhausted to function. And that's when it gets truly alarming. Many didn't know what they were missing to sleep. It's not a pill or a supplement, it's the body's own release valve. Masturbation might seem like a small, even trivial act, but for some, it can be the difference between 4 hours of fragmented sleep and 7 hours of deep, restorative rest. A patient told me that after reconnecting with this part of himself, he sleeps like he did 30 years ago. I didn't realize how much I needed that release. I thought I was just getting old. That's the problem. Many people confuse biological neglect with aging and suffer in silence because of it. If you lie awake at night with a racing mind, tense muscles, and the hours slowly ticking by, ask yourself, when was the last time your body felt completely relaxed, completely released? Sometimes the answer isn't a new medication or a breathing app. Sometimes it's rediscovering an old rhythm that your body still remembers, if you let it. But while a lack of sleep can silently erode your energy and mental clarity, the next consequence is even more physical. It manifests in weakened muscles, altered balance, and a bladder that starts to betray you. Let's talk about what really happens to your pelvic floor and circulation when intimacy disappears. 5. Weakened pelvic floor and blood circulation. A few years ago, I treated a retired firefighter in his 70s, a proud man who had been physically strong for most of his life. He came in complaining of small urinary leaks and difficulty standing for long periods without back or hip pain. "It's strange," he said. "I feel like the foundation of my body is slowly weakening." What he was describing wasn't just aging, but the slow, silent weakening of his pelvic floor. And he wasn't alone. The pelvic floor is a group of muscles at the base of the torso, the same ones that support the bladder, intestines, and sexual organs. Most people don't think about these muscles until something goes wrong. Urinary leaks, constipation, erectile dysfunction, or discomfort when standing or walking can occur. But here's the part that is often overlooked. Regular sexual stimulation, including masturbation, plays a fundamental role in keeping these muscles active and engaged. You see, during arousal and orgasm, the pelvic floor contracts rhythmically. This contraction is an exercise, not for vanity, but for functionality. It improves blood flow in the lower part of the body, strengthens the internal support system, and maintains effective communication between nerves and muscles. It's not about performance, it's about preservation. When you stop masturbating regularly, these muscles not only become dormant, but also begin to atrophy. Blood flow decreases, tissue loses elasticity, and the nervous response declines. Over time, you can have unexpected symptoms: frequent urination, light dribbling after urinating, difficulty holding in gas, or even pain when moving. In men, this can mean a drastic drop in sexual function. In women, it can cause dryness, tension, and discomfort that prevent any intimacy. I've seen once independent older people start to avoid social outings simply because they don't trust their bladder. I've seen others become embarrassed by sudden urinary leaks when coughing or sneezing, without knowing that all of this is due to something neglected for years: circulation and muscle activity in the pelvic region. And here's something I must say clearly. Ignoring this area is not just an inconvenience, it can cause falls, incontinence, and a loss of dignity that no one deserves. You might start relying on pads, special underwear, or planning your proximity to a bathroom, all because the foundation of your body isn't receiving the stimulation and support it needs. And the longer this situation lasts, the harder it is to reverse. What breaks my heart is how many people suffer in silence, don't talk about it, feel ashamed, are confused, or assume it's just part of aging. But I can't emphasize this enough. Your body still wants to function, even at 70, 80, or older. And one of the most effective and natural ways to support it, without pills or gadgets, is through safe and regular intimate stimulation. By reclaiming this connection, you don't just activate pleasure, you reclaim strength, send blood where it's needed most, awaken nerves, keep tissues alive, and remind the lower part of your body that it still matters. But as physical as this consequence is, the next one is even deeper. It affects your immune system, your cellular defenses, and your body's ability to protect itself from illness. Because what happens in your bloodstream after orgasm could be one of the biggest and most overlooked health benefits. Let's talk about how sexual inactivity could be silently weakening your immune system. 6. Silently weakened immune system. A few winters ago, a regular patient of mine, a man in his 70s who had always been healthy, came in looking exhausted. He had been sick 3 times that season with persistent colds and minor infections. He said he used to recover in a day or two, but now any small issue would knock him out for weeks. After ruling out the usual problems, diet, sleep, medication, I gently asked about another aspect of his life. "Have you had any sexual activity, even on your own?" He gave a wry smile and shook his head. "Not much. That part of me is just retired." What he didn't understand, and what most people don't know, is that sexual activity, including masturbation, has a direct impact on the immune system. It's not a metaphor, it's biology. During sexual arousal, and especially at orgasm, the body produces a wave of biochemical substances, not just dopamine and oxytocin that make you feel good, but also agents that strengthen the immune system. Immunoglobulin A, for example, increases significantly. It's a key antibody that helps defend the body against viruses, bacteria, and infections, especially in the respiratory and digestive systems. Endorphins are also released, which reduce inflammation and promote healing. Now imagine living without this boost, not just for a week, but for months or even years. Your body begins to lose one of its easiest and most natural defenses at a time when your immune system is already slowing down. Eliminating this mechanism is like taking the batteries out of your smoke detector. You might not notice at first, but when a problem arises, your body won't respond as it once did. I've seen this in real time. Patients who have shut down their intimate lives get sick more often, recover more slowly, or have bouts of chronic inflammation. And even if they don't realize it, the body is sending a clear signal. Something is missing. And it's not just about fighting the flu. The immune system is linked to long-term disease prevention, cancer surveillance, cardiovascular protection, and even wound healing. Regular sexual activity helps maintain hormonal balance, reduce stress hormones like cortisol, and improve circulation, all of which are crucial for the immune system. When this disappears, the domino effect begins. Stress increases, sleep worsens, inflammation grows, and the body becomes slower and weaker. A woman in her 70s, after losing her husband, told me she hadn't touched herself in almost 5 years. When we had an honest conversation about the connection between sexual activity and immunity, she decided to try to reconnect with that part of herself, not for desire, but for well-being. Months later, she came back with brighter eyes and more energy. "I can't explain it," she said, "but I feel more alive, as if my body is working with me again, not against me." This isn't magic. It's what happens when the body receives the signals it needs, signals that we are still here, that we still want to thrive. It's easy to ignore, avoid, or feel uncomfortable, but your immune system doesn't care about shame. It only responds to action. And sexual stimulation, even alone, is a powerful action that sends a message of life and strength to every cell in your body. But while a low immune system can expose the body to illness, the final consequence of neglecting personal intimacy can undermine the sense of identity even more deeply. Because when you stop touching your body, little by little, you can stop recognizing who you are. Let's explore how self-neglect can silently erode your self-esteem and what you can do to reclaim it. 7. Loss of your body, your ownership, and your self-esteem. I will never forget a quiet conversation I had with a patient in his late 60s. He was a retired school principal, once confident, sharp, the type of man who commanded a room. But when he came in for a routine checkup, something about his posture had changed. Shoulders slightly slumped, eyes a little dimmed. As we talked, he sighed and said, "I no longer feel like I live in this body. I feel like I just inhabit it." That phrase stuck with me because what he described is not rare. I hear it from men and women with different words, but with the same underlying truth. At some point, they stopped feeling comfortable in their own skin. And all too often, this begins in silence, by giving up on intimacy, devaluing it as something unnecessary, too late in life, or something they've moved past. But this is what really happens when you stop touching yourself. When you stop paying attention to your body in such a deeply personal way, you start to disconnect from it, little by little, silently, and sometimes forever. Self-touch isn't just pleasure, it's presence. When you stimulate your body, even gently, even with no other goal than to feel, you remind your nervous system that you are still here, that you matter, that your body is still a part of your identity, not just a vessel you hope to leave behind. Without this, something changes. A kind of emotional and psychological distance is created. It's easier to ignore small aches and pains, easier to stop looking at yourself in the mirror, easier to believe that this phase of life isn't worth the effort. And that is the most dangerous loss of all, the loss of your own sense of worth. I've seen this disconnection lead to profound emotional numbness, shame about aging, a withdrawal from physical affection, even a loss of motivation for basic self-care. People stop exercising, eating well, and dressing with intention. Why bother, they think, if this body isn't mine anymore? A woman told me she hadn't touched herself since menopause. "I just stopped feeling like a woman," she said. And the less she touched herself, the more that word disappeared. It was a harsh blow, because that is what happens to many older adults who stop connecting with their physical selves. They don't just lose pleasure, they lose identity, visibility, a sense of vitality. And here is what I need you to hear. It doesn't have to be this way. Reclaiming your body through self-touch isn't about being sexual like you were at 20. It's about honoring the life that is still present within you. It's saying, "I am still here, I still feel, I still deserve to be seen, even by myself." When you reconnect with your body, even in the privacy of your home, you start to reverse that silent fading away. You remind yourself that aging doesn't mean disappearing, that your value didn't end with youth. You come home to yourself, and that is perhaps the most healing act of all. And now, as we reach the end of this journey, let's tie everything together. Because while each of these 7 consequences is serious on its own, together, they reveal a much larger and more urgent story. In this final message, I want to show you exactly what is at stake and, most importantly, how you can take back control starting today. Final reflections: reclaiming intimacy, reclaiming health. As I look back on the years I've dedicated to caring for older patients, what strikes me most are not just the medical challenges, but the silent, invisible losses they carry. Losses that don't show up on a lab test or a physical exam. A man who once felt confident now avoids mirrors. A woman who once radiated joy and tranquility hasn't felt anything in her body for years. And most of them have been told, "This is just what aging is." But I don't believe that for a second. And if you've stayed with me this long, I believe you don't either. Because this is the truth. The moment you stop caring about your sexuality, the moment you abandon that part of your body and identity, a chain of silent consequences begins. We've talked about them one by one. How your prostate and urinary health can deteriorate when regular release is eliminated. How your brain becomes foggy and less sharp when it lacks stimulation. How the absence of physical intimacy can trigger depression, poor sleep, weaken circulation, and even compromise your immune system. And perhaps most painfully of all, how giving up that private, personal connection with your own body can silently erode your self-esteem until you feel like a stranger to yourself. These are not small things. They are not just part of aging. They are warning signs that your body, your mind, and your spirit are crying out for your attention. I've met patients who felt broken, disconnected, and numb, and I've seen the transformation in their eyes when they started to reclaim this part of their life. It doesn't require anyone else. It doesn't require youth or perfect health. It just requires your permission to see yourself as worthy of intimacy, even now, especially now. I know this is a topic many people avoid. Some feel shame. Others were never taught that caring for your sexual health after a certain age is okay. But I want you to hear this from a doctor who has walked this path with thousands of men and women. Not only is it okay, it is essential. Masturbation in older age isn't about pleasure. It's about circulation, clarity, hormonal balance, emotional grounding, immune defense, and identity. It's not a luxury. It's self-care. A declaration that you are still alive in this body and you are responsible for its well-being. A patient once told me, "I didn't realize how much I missed feeling like myself until I finally reconnected with that part of me." This is what it's about. Not just surviving the years, but inhabiting them with presence, dignity, and joy. So if you've forgotten this part of yourself, buried it, or judged it, I invite you to reconsider, to reconnect, and to remember that your body still listens, is still capable, and still deserves. Start slowly, with curiosity, with kindness. But most importantly, start. Because by choosing to care for this part of yourself again, you not only protect your health, but you also reclaim your life. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and leave a comment to let me know your thoughts. Whether you agree, disagree, or have questions, your voice matters, and your story can help someone else feel seen.